So if you sat down at your computer here after this time this morning and just pulled Google up and Googled top 10 greatest. But don't put any category in there, just top 10 greatest. It's interesting what pops up on the first page of a Google search. Google doesn't have any natural intelligence. All it does is reflect back to us probably the common sense of the consciousness of human beings. It's based on what we search for, what we look for, what we click on, what we like. All of those things go into those Google searches. And so what you get on that first page is usually the conglomeration, the aggregation of what the world thinks about whatever you're searching on. So if you type in top 10 greatest, but don't put a category in, it feeds back to you what basically the world thinks of as top 10 greatest things, whatever. And I was fascinated when I did this week, preparing for this sermon, to find that on my top 10 page, maybe yours will look a lot like it too if you did this, that the first page of search results under top 10 greatest was basically sports figures, athletes, rock and roll songs, and movies. And I have to disagree with Google because Google's not always right. The greatest rock and roll song was not Bob Dylan's Like a Rolling Stone. It's just not it. I have some other thoughts on that, but we'll share those another day. And on the movies, it's like, really? The greatest movie or movies of all time is a tie between The Princess Bride and Forrest Gump. Everybody knows that. So, who's going to say it for me?
Inconceivable.
Thank you. I love that woman. That was not a plan, but inconceivable. If you haven't seen Princess Bride, go home and stream that. It's an awesome movie. Point being, the world thinks that there are things that are great. Google just reflects that to us. Apparently, if those search results are any indication, greatness is defined by athletic ability or artistic creativity in music or in movies. Now, if you want to get specific, you can drill down on any list of greatness based on whatever category that you like, whatever you're interested in. I am sure that someone has compiled a top 10 greatest of whatever it is that you find fascinating to know about. But I am willing to suggest that if you were to type in the greatest servants of all time, you might have to scroll through a whole bunch of Google pages to find anything along that line. We were talking about that before service this morning. I give my sermon notes to the projectionist, and we were having a conversation, and I won't say her name, but Kayla pulled up ChatGPT and found out that there are, in fact, Google search results for greatest servants of all time, and the top one, of course, is Jesus, which I said, well, that's the point today, of course. But greatness in the world is reflected by skill, by prowess, by creativity, and those are not bad things. But greatness, as we talk about it here today in the church in a spiritual sense, is very nearly the opposite of cultural greatness. It is not the one who is best known. It's not the one who can jump the highest or throw the farthest or write the best music or create wonderful movies. In fact, greatness in spiritual terms is anything but. It's lowering ourselves. It's choosing to be less than. And we're not really, if we're honest, we're not really very good at that. We do not prefer to feel like we are maybe under someone's thumb or that we are under their power or what have you. We don't like that feeling at all. In fact, really, true service to others voluntarily is a learned behavior. It's something that we have to learn how to do. And the church is a place where we actually begin to learn how those things work. Today we're talking about service, having the heart of a servant or a servant leader in particular. And today we're going to start with the passage. If you want to open your Bibles or if you want to pull out your phone or tablet, however you access the Scriptures, you'll want to go ahead and rest on John 13. That's where we'll spend most of our time. But I'm not starting there today. Rather, I would start with the heart of a servant and look at a couple of things before we get to John. Let's think about these disciples who've walked with Jesus for all of these years now. He's taught them by His word and His deed. He's showed them amazing things, and He has apprenticed them, discipled them to become the leaders that will follow Him with the mission. But in the meantime, for those 3 years, over and over and over, Jesus has told them that service to others is key. He's had to tell them in many ways. In Mark chapter 10, in fact, He has to tell them, they're setting Him up as this great leader, this human, earthly type leader, and He has to tell them very bluntly, no, I didn't come here to be served, to have a bunch of people around me meeting every one of my needs. In fact, Jesus says, I came to serve and to give my life as a ransom for many. They didn't understand it then. Then when you turn to Luke 22, Jesus gets very specific on this. And there was a dispute, it says in verse 24 of Luke 22, there was a dispute that arose among them as to which of them was to be regarded as the greatest. Who's going to have the spot next to the king? That's the question. And He said, the kings of the Gentiles exercise lordship over them, and those in authority over them are called benefactors. But not so with you. That's not how it's going to work in our group. He says, rather, let the greatest among you become as the youngest, and the leader as one who serves. Now, what's fascinating to me about that is the context of Luke 22 is the same as John 13. If you've heard that passage in John 13 before, Jesus and His disciples have gathered for the Passover. It's the last time. In fact, it's where this very thing that we just did called communion was instituted. Jesus says, do this in remembrance of me. It's the last time He'll meet with them that way. In a few short hours, He'll be arrested and tried, and the next day they'll hang Him on a cross. But Luke 22 tells part of that same story. John leaves this part out. Luke tells us that everybody got upstairs in the room, and they're having an argument on the way in about who's the greatest, who's the top dog among the 12. It reminds me of growing up when we would go to my grandparents' house, my mother's father and mother, and I had 2 cousins on that side of the family, all boys, all 4 of us. We're all fairly close together in age. And when we all went to Grandpa and Grandma's house, and we'd always have a big meal around. They had a really long dining table, room for everybody. And the boys, me and my brother and cousins, would have this argument about who got to sit next to Grandpa at the dinner table. It was supposed to be me. I'm the oldest. I'm the best. I'm the smartest, the best looking. I mean, it's me, right? No. Well, it got contentious at times, and sometimes Grandpa had to fuss at us, and that was always bad if Grandpa had to fuss at us. But imagine that kind of a dynamic, that kind of a jockeying around to be closest to the one we love the most, to be closest to Jesus. Maybe that's what they were fighting over. Nobody knows for sure why they were having this discussion about the greatest. But in Luke, we find out that little detail, that little glimpse into that dynamic that's going on there. But when you get over to John, where we're going to spend our time, you discover that Jesus walks into the room. He's in the room, He's looking at these guys, and you can just almost see the expression on His face and hear His voice going, oh. He knows what's coming. They don't yet. But He's got to get their attention on this fundamental part of what it means to follow Christ, which is to serve. And now in John 13, we discover that there are some things about service that He demonstrates very tangibly, very literally in what He does. But it starts not with the action, but with the heart. It starts with the heart. John 13, verse 1. Now before the feast of the Passover, when Jesus knew that His hour had come to depart out of this world to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the what? To the end. True service has to begin with love. If it doesn't start with love, then it is just obligation or a duty that we have to do. We have to do, I got to do this. But if it starts with love, that's a whole different place to begin. When service starts with love, it's doing exactly the same thing that Jesus did. As frustrated as he probably was with those guys, as challenging as they could be at times, and with everything that is in his path in the next 24 hours or less, he still chooses to serve. How often do we find ourselves in that place? Somebody says, hey, can you help with this? And we go, man, you don't have any idea what my day is like tomorrow. You don't have any idea what I've got to deal with tomorrow. No one had any idea what Jesus had to deal with the next day. Not yet. But they would. And still he took the time and loved them enough to serve them, even if it wasn't convenient, wasn't easy. But he loved them, and he loved them to the very end. The heart of a servant begins with love. But if we start with love, but we don't go any further, then it's just a good feeling, isn't it? It's just a feeling we have. And sometimes in life, it seems like, okay, it's enough just to have the feeling, oh, I felt it. But Jesus doesn't stop with the feeling of love. He takes the initiative to love them directly. Verse 3 of John 13:4 says, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands and that he had come from God and was going back to God, it says, he rose from the supper, he laid aside his outer garments, and taking a towel, tied it around his waist. Jesus took some initiative in this case. Jesus is their leader. He is, in their minds, Messiah. He is the king that God has sent, the anointed one who has come back to Israel to reestablish the glory of Israel, the greatness of God in the world, and they're thinking almost exclusively in human terms. And great leaders sit and let other people take care of them, don't they? That's just kind of how it works. First, back there in Luke, he says, look, you know how that happens in the world. You know how politicians are. And so it must have been eye-opening and startling when in the middle of Passover, when the leader of Passover, who was the mature one, the elder sort of speaking person who led the whole Passover ceremony, when that person broke kind of the tradition of Passover and gets up and takes off his outer garment and wraps a towel around his waist. This is servant behavior. Jesus has taken initiative not only to love them and to serve them, but also to do something about it, to make it happen. He rises from the table. He takes off his outer garments. He ties a towel around his waist, and he has got their attention. What in the world is going on? And in that moment, Jesus begins not only to have a heart of a servant, but to show the example of a servant. Verse 5 describes Jesus' posture in this moment. It says, then he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet, to wipe them with the towel that was wrapped around him. To that moment, no one in the room had taken the posture of a servant. They all argued about who got to be the top dog, not the bottom dog. And at that meal, when they gathered together, it wouldn't have been the painting. Who was it? Michelangelo? Did I get that right? Who was it that did the Last Supper painting? Somebody help me. Did I get that right? Wow, good for me. Michelangelo painted the Last Supper, and of course he painted it during the Renaissance when people sat at tables and chairs like we do. In first century Jerusalem, they would have reclined literally on pads on the floor, resting on their left arm, because you didn't eat with your left hand. They would rest on their left arm, and so there would be kind of these people sort of diagonally laying on the floor around this big table. real literally down on the floor. And this is how they did it. They ate out of common bowls and dishes. And so they're sitting there like this, and Jesus gets up, he ties the towel around his waist, and he assumes the posture of a servant. And he washes feet, which was common. That wasn't new. That wasn't a new idea. Somebody always got to do that when there were these gatherings like this, but never the leader, never the boss. And to get to those dirty toes, he had to get down on his knees with his face. I'm going to gross you out, right next to those dirty toes. Ew. He assumed the posture of a servant. This is his example. He said, this is what it's going to look like when you serve others. It isn't always going to be neat and clean and tidy. It's not always going to be easy. It's not always going to be fresh when you serve people. In fact, it could be pretty stinky. But this is the posture of a servant. And not only that, in doing so, he shows his purpose. He comes to Simon Peter, and Simon Peter says what everybody's thinking but knows better than to say. He doesn't have a filter, and so he just blurts it out. And he comes to Simon Peter, who says to him, Lord, do you wash my feet? You're the boss. What are you doing down here? You can't do that. And Jesus answers in verse 7, what I am doing you do not understand now, but afterward you will understand. And in fact, it's true that they did, because they remembered this so well that they wrote it down for us. And Peter's like, well, you won't ever wash my feet. This is just not right. This is not how the world works. And Jesus' example is designed to prove the heart of servantship, which is, yes, you're absolutely right. This isn't how the world works. This is how we work. This is what we do. This is different. It's supposed to be different. And Jesus tells him, he says, if I don't wash you, you don't have any share with me. Peter's following Jesus around for over 3 years. He's given up a lot to follow this guy and to learn from him and to be affiliated with him. You think he's quitting now? Think he's going to say, okay, never mind, I'm out. No, of course not. So he says, okay, well, if I'm in, I'm all in. Let's get this all done. Also, my hands and my head. And Jesus says to him, the one who is bathed doesn't need to wash except for his feet, but is completely clean. And you are clean, but not every one of you. Jesus is trying to teach something to Peter here. This isn't supposed to be bath time, y'all. This is about learning what it means to serve. This is what it looks like. And he tells them, y'all, he said y'all, it's in the Hebrew. He said, this is the plan. This is the plan going forward. When he washed their feet, verse 12, and put on his outer garments and resumed his place, he said to them, do you understand what I have done to you? And they went, yep, no. He says, you call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, for so I am. And that's true. And Jesus had never given up a bit of his authority and his power and his place and his purpose as the Savior of the Lord, the Savior of the world, the Lord of lords and the King of kings. He never set that aside to get down on the floor and wash dirty toes. And he acknowledges this with him. He says, yes, you call me teacher, rabbi, you call me Lord, and you are right, for so I am. And he says, even because of that place that he holds in creation, he says, you will do well to do the same as I have done. If I then, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example that you also should do just as I have done to you. That's powerful. When someone that you admire and trust and respect and you think highly of, and they turn around and then they do something for you, that's just so lowly. That's impressive. That causes people to sit up and take notice. I'm certain that the disciples sat there at the rest of that dinner and just chewed over that in their minds. What does he mean? Are we supposed to literally wash each other's feet? Not necessarily. But he shows us the heart of a servant, and he says it's based in love. It's based because we choose to love other people. It's not just a responsibility. It's not just a duty or an obligation. It's because we love each other and because we love people. And we take the initiative to step outside of ourselves and our busy days and our busy lives and our own fatigue and our own aches and pains and our own hurts, and we choose by our initiative to serve someone else. And in our example, we come along and we actually take the posture of a servant. Doesn't mean you're always going to spend your day on your knees or anything like that, but somehow or another we put ourselves in the position where we can get down into someone else's world and meet their need. And we demonstrate our purpose in that, which is to be sure that everybody has a chance to know some really powerful things. It's the purpose of becoming servant leaders. Verses 16 and 17 of that same passage, Jesus is wrapping up this idea. He's trying to help them understand why this is going on. He says, "Truly, truly, I say to you, a servant is not greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. If you know these things, you're blessed are you if you do them." Jesus has just told them, yes, I am the rabbi, the leader, the teacher, the Messiah. I am the Son of God. They're going to understand that a whole lot better after tomorrow, after the cross. He says, that's the greatest service. Now, I'm sending you to do the same. And when you do those, you'll be blessed. And he said it over and over throughout his time amongst his friends and in the world, but he says the greatest is the least. That's the thing to remember. Serving others is not going to land any of us on a top 10 greatest list in this world. Probably never get your name on any list in that regard. But it will be sure that you will receive a reward in heaven. Here's how I know that. If you turn back over to Matthew 25, and you look in there in that passage, Jesus is explaining. Somebody had asked him, what's it going to look like when you return, when the kingdom is instituted? And he tells them a bunch of parables, a bunch of stories. And one of those stories he tells them is about when that day comes and when everybody's gathered in front of him as the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, and they're separated into two groups, the sheep and the goats. And he tells them a story about how they blessed him, how they took care of him. And their response in verse 37 is, the righteous will answer him saying, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you drink? When did we see you a stranger and welcome you, or naked and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and visit you? And Jesus' answer is, whenever you did it to the least of these, you did it for me. Whenever you and I serve someone else in the name of Jesus, it is just as if we had done that to him. And Jesus clearly teaches those folks, those sheep, are the ones who are going to experience the rewards of heaven for eternity. Now, there's some poor people on the other side, poor goats. I feel bad for the goats sometimes. He tells them the same thing, but the opposite. He says, you didn't see me, you didn't take care of me, you didn't clothe me, you didn't feed me, you didn't visit me, you didn't do all those things. And their response is, well, when did we see you? When did that not happen? And in verse 45 of Matthew 25, it says, it's when you didn't do these things for the least of these, you didn't do it for me. There's a reward attached to service, maybe not in the moment, other than the satisfaction of doing something that blesses someone else, which is wonderful. But the ultimate reward for that comes when you and I stand before our Master and he says to us, you did a good job. I'm proud of you. We don't do it to get the reward. We get the reward because we did it. You see the difference? So let me tell you about a couple things that may help you in the regard of here at Pathway. Opportunities. If you look around, if you've been here with us as Pathway for a while, you may have noticed that the services are starting to fill in on Sunday morning. If you haven't ever come on during first service, I don't think I'm exaggerating when I say it's nearly doubled since January, which is a wonderful, wonderful thing. This service is filling in a lot too. We aren't out of the summer season yet, but I'm praying and asking for God to bring everybody back, and we're all here all at the same time, and we're all having to sit right next to each other. You're going to have to be friends on Sunday morning because it's going to be full. All that to say that it took some way for you to get here this morning. Nobody rode a horse. Most of us didn't. I don't think anybody rode a bicycle. I was reminded that one gentleman brings a scooter, but I'm calling that a car. And so we all got here by car this morning, right? And so cars take parking spaces, and cars are big, and they take up a lot of room. And we have a limited amount of space to park cars. It's just a fact. So one opportunity to serve that has come up that's newish for us is the idea that we need some people to go out every Sunday morning and help people find parking spaces, find a place to park kind of neat and tidy so we can get as many cars on this space as we possibly can. Let me tell you, I should have mentioned this a minute ago, but let me say it now. We sometimes find ourselves being guilty in the church of saying, look, we need somebody to work in the nursery. We need somebody to make communion trays, or we need somebody to make coffee, or we need somebody to go out and help people find parking spaces. And we don't do a very good job of saying what the purpose is. It's not only to make sure cars are parked properly. It's not only to make sure that we get our caffeine jolt first thing in the morning. It's not only just so that there's breads and cups of juice, but the purpose is so that we can all come together on Sunday morning and worship. So we can testify that Jesus is Lord, and we can tell the whole world and the world unseen that we believe this is true. So that we can help others find their way to Christ, so that we can walk out of here together on Sunday mornings, encouraged, built up, prepared to go out into the world we live in and make a difference. And that happens when people fill trays, and that happens when people help park cars, and that happens when classes are taught, and that happens when babies are rocked, and it happens for a purpose, and those things exist for a purpose, and that is to make this work, for us to fulfill the mission that we're on, to build and make disciples. And so whether it's raining outside, or it's sunny, or hot, or cold, or windy, or whatever's going on, the purpose to be out there on that Sunday morning in the traffic is to help people find a place to park so they can come in here and experience all those wonderful things. Standing out there isn't just a thankless job. It could be the job that one day you'll hear Jesus say, "Thank you. You did a good job. Thank you." So if you're interested, if you feel a prompting to say, I think I could help with that, I could lead that, or I could help on a Sunday every now and then, come and see me after. Don McNeese, the chairman of our deacons, will be another one you could talk to if you were interested in taking on that servant leader role, or just one Sunday every now and then. We'd appreciate it. I also want to mention to you that next Sunday, we will be ordaining the first set of deacons here at Pathway. Yeah, this is amazing. This is great. And so, we're still getting this thing going. We're still figuring out things as we go. One of those things is getting our deacons through a training process, an acceptance process. And next Sunday on this stage, your elders will stand around them, put their hands on them, pray over them for servant leadership. And we're excited about that. I hope you'll be here for that. We want to serve you this morning. If you're new and you want to know what it means to be a part of Pathway, if you are interested in Jesus and you want to know what it means to follow him, if there's any questions, any prayers that you need to offer, we want to serve you in that. When we sing here in a minute, that's an opportunity to come right up here. One of our elders is here. I'll be here, and we'd love to serve you in that. Let's pray.